Or will there be a third world war in the Middle East? This question is becoming increasingly relevant as the geopolitical landscape shifts and tensions escalate. Recent events have ignited this debate, stirring up a whirlwind of speculation and concern. One such event is the assassination of Hamas's negotiator, a shocking incident that has sent ripples across the globe. This, coupled with the mounting tensions between Israel and Iran, has brought us to a pivotal point in history. With Israel's aggressive actions straining international relations and its Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu facing internal challenges, the stakes are high. On the other hand, Iran's vow to retaliate sparks fears of a regional war. In this complex web of power dynamics, the role of the United States is crucial. The divergent views between the US and Israel on handling the conflict could either tip the scales towards war or steer the situation towards resolution. As we dive into this issue, we ask again, will there be a third world war in the Middle East? History often serves as our best guide in predicting future events. The Middle East, as we know, is no stranger to conflict. It has been a hotbed of tension and warfare for decades, from the Six-Day War in 1967 to the Iran-Iraq War in the 80s and more recently the Iraq War in the early 21st century. Each of these conflicts has had its unique set of triggers and consequences, but they all share a common thread: escalation. In the case of the Six-Day War, it began as a localized conflict between Israel and its neighboring Arab states but quickly caught the attention of the international community. The Cold War superpowers, namely the United States and the Soviet Union, found themselves drawn into the fray, supplying arms and political backing to their preferred sides. Fast forward to the Iran-Iraq War. It was a conflict that started over territorial disputes but ballooned into a full-blown war that lasted for almost a decade. It involved not only the warring nations but also their allies and proxies, which extended the war's reach and impact. In the early 21st century, the Iraq War was initiated by the United States and a coalition of allies under the premise of combating terrorism. The war and its aftermath have left lasting imprints on the region, influencing the geopolitical landscape and fueling further tensions. Now let's consider the present tensions involving Israel, Iran, Lebanon, and Yemen. We see similar patterns: a localized conflict with the potential to draw in international players, escalating tensions, and the risk of a broader war. The recent assassinations, the strained relations, and the differing perspectives between allies all echo the elements that have historically led to larger wars in the Middle East. The key difference, however, lies in the stakes. The current tensions carry with them the shadow of a potential Third World War, a scenario that the world has been fortunate to avoid since the end of the Second World War. The involvement of major powers like the United States, their differing approaches to the conflict, and the potential for a domino effect of escalating conflicts all contribute to this heightened risk. So, given the history, what are the odds of another world war erupting in the Middle East? This is the question that looms large as we watch the events unfold. There are several arguments that point towards the possibility of a third world war in the Middle East. Firstly, we can't ignore the aggressive actions of Israel. The recent assassinations of Hamas political chief Ismail Haniyeh and Hezbollah figure Fuad Shukr have heightened tensions in the region. These audacious actions suggest that Israel is willing to take significant risks to assert its dominance, even if it means provoking a potential war. Moreover, the strained relations between Israel and its international partners further complicate the situation. The fallout from these assassinations has sparked criticism from countries around the globe. This international pressure could push Israel into a corner, and as history has shown us, nations backed into a corner can react in unpredictable, often destructive ways. Then, there's the wild card: Iran. The Middle Eastern nation has vowed to respond to the assassinations, but the nature of their retaliation remains uncertain. Iran could choose a path of diplomacy or, in a worst-case scenario, a military response. If the latter, this could trigger a chain reaction of conflicts throughout the region. On top of everything, we have the internal issues within Israel to consider. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's low approval ratings and legal issues could potentially influence his decision-making process. In an attempt to rally national support or divert attention from internal issues, he might opt for a more aggressive stance. These factors suggest that the situation could escalate into a larger conflict. But is war inevitable? On the other hand, there are several reasons to believe that a third world war in the Middle East may not occur. Firstly, there's the potential for a ceasefire in Gaza. Regional powers have been closely monitoring the tension-filled situation, and the possibility of a ceasefire could diffuse the escalating tensions, at least for the time being. Secondly, consider the United States' calls for a more cautious approach. Vice President Kamala Harris, for instance, has been vocal about the need for a ceasefire. The United States, a key player in global politics, advocating for restraint could influence the actions of other nations involved in the conflict. Further, there's the potential for the U.S. to set clear boundaries for Israel. The recent suspected assassination of Hamas's negotiator Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran, which complicates U.S.-Iran relations, could potentially prompt the U.S. to establish more concrete guidelines to prevent further escalation. In addition, we must also consider the internal struggles within Israel itself. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is currently facing challenges including low approval ratings and legal issues. These internal pressures could influence Israel's actions on the international stage. Lastly, the strained relations between Israel and its international partners due to its aggressive actions could also play a significant role. The international community could exert pressure on Israel to de-escalate the situation and avoid a full-blown war. However, it's important to remember that these are merely possibilities, and the dynamics of international politics are complex and unpredictable. While these factors could potentially prevent the situation from escalating further, they by no means guarantee it. These factors could prevent the situation from escalating further, but can they truly guarantee peace? So where does all of this leave us? We've journeyed through the complex historical precedents, discussed the motivations for conflict, and examined the case against warfare in the Middle East. Now it's time to weigh these arguments and draw our conclusions. The tensions in the Middle East are palpable, no one can deny that. We've seen how the assassination of Hamas political chief Ismail Haniyeh and Hezbollah figure Fuad Shukr have escalated the situation, with Iran vowing to respond. Israel's actions have put a strain on its international relations, and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu faces a slew of challenges both domestically and internationally. On the other side of the coin, we have the United States, advocating for a more cautious approach to avoid further escalation. With Vice President Kamala Harris calling for a ceasefire, it's clear the U.S. perspective differs significantly from Israel's. This divergence in views adds another layer of complexity to the already convoluted situation. Add to this mix the contrasting perspectives between the Israeli and American public, and the uncertainties surrounding Israel's aggressive actions, it becomes evident that the solution to this crisis is far from straightforward. However, does this mean we're heading towards a third world war in the Middle East? As of now, it's hard to say. The potential for a ceasefire in Gaza could sway the situation in a more peaceful direction. Yet, the aggressive stance of Prime Minister Netanyahu and the unpredictable nature of Iran's retaliation leave room for the possibility of escalation. We must also consider the role of regional powers and how their actions or inactions could influence the course of events. The Middle East is a geopolitical chessboard, and any move can trigger a series of reactions that could either douse the flames or fan them further. As we ponder on these issues, we return to our central question. Will there be a third world war in the Middle East? The future as it stands is uncertain. What is certain, however, is that the decisions made in the coming days and weeks will have far-reaching implications, not just for the Middle East, but for the entire world. In the end, only time will tell. The landscape of global politics is as intricate as it is unpredictable. Each move, each decision has a ripple effect that can alter the course of history. In the midst of these tensions, it is essential to stay informed, to understand the stakes, the players, and the potential outcomes. It's not just about who will win in a conflict between Israel, the USA, Iran, Lebanon, and Yemen. It's about the consequences for the people living in these countries, the region, and indeed the entire world. It's about the cost of war in lives and resources, and the long journey towards rebuilding and healing that follows. In the face of such complexities, we must remember the importance of peace and diplomacy. These tools are not just the hallmarks of civilized society, but also our best hope in averting widespread conflict. They demand patience, understanding, and the audacity to believe in a better future, even in the most challenging of times. As we continue to watch the situation unfold, we keep asking, will there be a third world war in the Middle East? We hope not, For the sake of all involved, we hope not.